I decided to ask Mom to go to school so that I could become a Girl Scout. She was about 3 years older than me, but we started to play, and it evolved into a sexual relationship. If I cannot be happy with a man, then that means that I'm a lesbian. I just had to move, and I just jumped and went to the front and kneel myself there. And I just said to the Lord, Lord, I cannot do nothing, but you can do everything.
Welcome to Pure Passion. My name is Colette Berque. Over the years, we've had many survivors of childhood sexual abuse give their testimony here on Pure Passion. We've noted that most are victimized by people known to them, whether it be a family member, a babysitter, a youth leader, or someone else who is close to the family system. Usually, we offer testimony of children who have been preyed upon by adults. But did you know, according to U.S. Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Statistics, about a quarter of all child molesters are under the age of 18? Yes, children molest other children. Usually someone several years younger than they are, and often someone of the age they were when they were molested. Today, our guest is a young lady who was molested by an older girl while both were in Girl Scouts. One result was that she lived a lesbian lifestyle for a time, but one day she met Jesus.
I was born in a small town in a small island in Puerto Rico. My mother was a professional. She was a chemist, and she worked long hours at the pharmaceutical company. She did all that she had to do to give me a good life. There wasn't a father figure in my life. I have uncles that were very loving, that were very supportive, but that male figure in the house was absent. I didn't have an emotional relationship with her, that she wasn't, in a sense, present to me, touching my hair, or kissing me, or telling me I love you. That are my first memories. That wasn't present. And as I grow up and I went to school, I saw the difference between me and the other kids. Yes, I had the best things, best shoes. My uniforms were new. My books were new. But all that didn't supplement the emotional needs that I had. As I grew up, I wanted to be part of the group of girls, and I decided to ask Mom to go to school so that I could become a Girl Scout. I was about 7 years old. I was in first grade, and Mom left the work early to be able to go and register me and do everything. And that was the beginning of being able to try to fit in school, try to fit with the girls. And it was a pretty good experience, and it helped me to integrate myself with girls. I was very outspoken and very adventurous and very tomboy. I like going to the camps and doing the fires and looking for wood, all that type of things. And as I continued to grow up, I started liking things that boys like. For example, I love Legos. I used to love Legos, Star Wars, cars, G.I. Joes, all those toys that were boys. But when I was 10 years old, I started questioning my life, and I started questioning what I was. And at that time, older Girl Scout that was about 12 or 13 years old. She was about 3 years older than me. I don't know how it started, but we started to play, and it evolved into a sexual relationship. I didn't know what was happening. At that moment in time, I desire that attention. I desire that that need to be needed, that being wanted, that being touched. And although I didn't understand what was happening, I followed it, and I went until a moment in time, about a year and a half after that started, that I knew that something was wrong. I didn't know what it was, but I wanted to stop. And at that moment in time, I was threatened by the girl that if I stopped doing it, she was going to tell my mother. Although I didn't understand that that was sexual sin, something in my heart, the Spirit prompted me to know that something was wrong. I remember one time that I went into confession to a priest, and it wasn't a very pleasant situation, because instead of trying to find out what was happening, he just told me, what you're doing is wrong. There wasn't any compassion. There wasn't any direction. There wasn't any help. And that frustrated me, because I went there looking for help. I went there looking for a word of hope, for a word of, it's okay. And what I found out was a negative experience in that moment in time. In very short time, my mother and my father start having a relationship again. They start meeting and dating. And by December of the same year, they told me that they were going to get married. It was very shocking to me. I never had had a man in my house. And this completely unknown man came to my life and was an authoritative figure, and was asking and was requesting me to respect him. But I didn't think that he had gained that respect that he was asking for. It was very difficult, because at the same time that I was meeting him, I was going through this abuse with this girl. All was at the same time. There was this, in a sense, hurricane going on in my life. Being an adolescent, starting adolescence, trying to get out of a sexual abuse by a girl older than me, this new man in my life. So it was a turmoil. The first 2 years of my father at my house were very difficult. There were a lot of fights. There were a lot of punches. There was hitting. When I was small, I wasn't hit by my mother, or I wasn't physically punished. So it was very shocking to me. It was very shocking, his attitude. And when he drank, he became very violent. He became short-tempered. And if I did something wrong, if I haven't cleaned the porch the right way, he will get mad. You didn't do things right. You did things wrong. I couldn't comply with his expectations. I couldn't get to his level. And that was very painful, because I wanted him to love me. I wanted to do things right, so that he will approve of me and receive affirmation from that male figure. I had a desire for a father. I wanted to have a male figure that supported me, that was there with me at school, that will love me and will affirmate me. The absence of my earthly father, the absence of my biological father, made me change my view from God, my Heavenly Father. A child that had a faith that would pray daily for his father to come to meet him was starting to die in a sense, because after having him, it was like, this is all that there is. This is what I have. This is my father. I don't want this. I thought that I wasn't, that I have done something wrong to God, and that he would not like to have relationship with me anymore. And that was hard because I was raised in private school, Catholic school, where we had to go to church every week. We had religion classes. And at that moment in time, I thought that I had to redeem myself. What could I do so that God will love me? What could I do so that God will accept me? Because I felt that I was damaged goods. I thought that I could redeem myself in part by getting into a relationship with a man. I was, by then, by 15, I knew that what had happened wasn't right, that was called abuse, that having relationship with a person of the same sex wasn't God's plan. But at the same time, I never worked out the desires that were started. So I started meeting this guy that was older than me, and we, let's say, fall in love, and I tried to work out my relationship through him. I poured myself to him, doing everything that he wanted, being pleasing to him, being the best girl that I could be. And it became a codependent relationship. I was dependent on his affirmation to feel good. I depended on what he said so that I will do it. He will ask me, what do you want to do? Well, whatever you want. I just want to please you. What do you want to do? Where you want to go to eat? All the things. 3 years later, I was by then 19, and we got married. I knew that he had problems with pornography, and I knew that he had problems with masturbation. A year and a half after getting married, his addiction of pornography escalated, and his problem with masturbation didn't stop. By then, I was involved with him on the pornography, and although it was very repugnant at first for me, I was able to overcome that because he liked it. He was emotionally abusive. And as I had come from an abusive relationship, that abuse was normal, was part of being of the relationship. And it escalated to the point that one moment in time, I wanted to die. And I went looking for help to a hospital, and I was diagnosed with depression. At Christmas, after being with him 3 years, at Christmas, I decided that I couldn't stand that anymore. I couldn't stand his distance. I couldn't stand his rejection of me. I couldn't stand his lack of affection towards me, and I left. I felt and I believed that I wasn't a woman enough, that I wasn't a woman that could be loved. I thought, if I cannot be happy with a man, then that means that I'm a lesbian. So let's try to live this lifestyle. Let's start to look for the places that women look for and then pour myself to a woman to get affirmation and to feel alive. At that point, I was visiting gay bars. I was visiting adult shops because my addiction to pornography escalated and escalated. And at the same time that I was living this life of this gay lifestyle, trying to fulfill the gay lifestyle with drinking and partying and going places, I knew that something was missing, that something wasn't wrong. And at the same time that I was living that life, I had a complete different life at church. I was a youth minister with a group of 93 kids under my leadership that preach at retreats, that would be speaking them the truth of the word, but I was living a double life. I was an addict to pornography, an addict to masturbation. I was partying and doing and trying to live a gay lifestyle, and I had a whole different life in front of my church, and there was a conflict in myself. I tried to be good for God, trying to do the right things, but at the same time I was living a whole different life, and they were choking each other. A lot of sexual scandals in the church have come out at that time, and I was like, what do I do? And they announced a conference, a sexual wholeness conference, and I told God, this is the only thing. I'm going to do this as a last step. I'm trying to redeem myself, but I can stop this. I can stop the cycle. I can stop doing all the things that I'm doing. I'm going to go there. And I went to this conference in a very small church, charismatic church, very different for me. And I was very afraid. But as the people start talking and I start hearing testimony of people, hearing the word hope, hearing the word freedom, hearing the word healing, hearing life after the storm, I said, I want that. What do I do? I cry out all my sin to the Lord. I cry out the pain that I was living in, how difficult it was to maintain living these two lives, and that I wanted to stop, but I didn't know how. Well, it came the moment in the service for an altar call, and the altar call was about all the ones that have been living in sexual sin and all that. And I was seated on my chair very straight, and I didn't want to move. But at the same time in my heart, I felt like a horse running in my heart, something very strong that I just had to move. And I just jumped and went to the front and kneeled myself there. And I just said to the Lord, Lord, I cannot do nothing, but you can do everything. I want some of that freedom that they were talking. I want to be able to be myself without having to live two lives. And I met the Lord there in a special way. I met the Lord through a pastor that prayed for me in silence without saying a word for more than 20 minutes. And as he finished, and as I look up to the cross, he said, in the name of Jesus, we pray. Something happened in the spiritual at that moment in time. I know that because I felt such a peace and such a difference in myself that God had to be there. So I started looking for help. It was very difficult. No, there weren't pastors that worked with sexual addicts or people with same-sex attraction. And the only pastor that worked was a Baptist pastor. She was a woman. And I was able to get an appointment with her. And as incredible as it is, God gave me the book of Romans to start reading it. And every night I will be on my knees reading Romans and reading the truth that was there, strong words, but at the same time, words of life. And that book sustained me for the next 4 months of my life. I stopped going to adult shops. I stopped looking at pornography. I stopped masturbating. I stopped living a double life. But more than that, I knew that I needed time for myself, that I needed to be healed. And I stepped down of leadership. It was my decision to step down of leadership for my sake, for the sake of the church, and for the sake of those kids that were under my leadership. And as I stepped down, I went into the Word and prayed and got my first appointment with this pastor. I remember very clearly that day because I was very afraid how she's going to react with my story, how she's going to accept me, she's going to reject me, what's going to happen. And as I got through the door of that church, that woman received me with open hands, and she just hugged me, and she told me, how good that you're here. I love you. The Lord loves you, and He's happy that you're here. And I felt an acceptance. I felt the embracing of the Father through the hands and through the hug of that pastor that day. And that began the journey. That began the journey of understanding what had happened on my life, understanding the wounds of abuse, of neglect, of verbal abuse, of lack of affirmation, of feeling rejected, of feeling abandoned by my mother because of her long hours of work, of feeling not good enough, of feeling unworthy, of feeling unlovable. This pastor worked with me for more than 6 months, and after 6 months, she told me, I think that you should come with me to Mexico for a conference. It was a conference from Exodus, Latin America. And in that conference, I met Andy Kominski. I didn't know who he was, but as I heard him teach, I saw transparency, an integrity, a freedom in the speaking, a clarity, hearing that we could say what we are, speak our sin, and be free, be heard by a community that captured my attention. So 6 months later, I went through a Living Waters training. And I was very reluctant to go because I was Catholic and this was going to be between evangelicals. But the first Friday that I was there, the Lord revealed me through a person from the ministry that spoke to me in English without knowing, because it was in Latin America, it was a Spanish training, that the Lord knew that I was there, that I was reluctant to be there, that I had fears, but that all the things that I was thinking were unfounded. During that week, I was able to receive love. By each teaching was an experience for me, was a transforming experience. It was like I could feel the Lord working in my heart, like having surgery in my heart, taking out the wounds, the sorrow, the hardness of heart, all that, and be able to forgive those who had sinned against me, but at the same time see how I have sinned because of my wounding.
Perhaps you have lived in darkness. Perhaps you're living in darkness right now. We've just heard a testimony that can be summarized like this: the only effective way to dispel darkness of any kind is to turn on the light. One day, after forgiving a woman who had been caught in adultery and who was about to be stoned to death by the crowd, Jesus turned to her and forgave her, saying, "I do not condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin. He then turned to the crowd and said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. You may have lived as a victim of abuse, and you may have made poor choices, sinful choices as a result. Because of those choices, you stand condemned by the law. But to you, Jesus would like to offer the same freedom He offered the adulterous woman. He wants to remove the condemnation that hangs over you. He wants to heal the brokenness that has festered inside of you. He wants to turn on a light in your inner being that will never go out, a light of joy, of purpose, and of love. Turn to Him today and let Him be your light and your life. I'm Colette Burque for Pure Passion.